I don't think of winning. Yeah. I don't think you need to win. I think you just need to make sure you cover your costs and make a profit. So are we winning in any industry that we're in? No, we're like, if you look at email, like Gmail is crushing us. They have 1 billion customers. Good for them. Great. We don't need 1 billion. We've got tens of thousands of paying customers. We're quite happy with that. Basecamp, there are lots and lots of products like Basecamp or compete in the same space like Basecamp. Good for them. We've got our huge customer base of Basecamp customers, which is basically drives our entire business. Wonderful. We're happy with that. Are we winning? No. Are we losing? No. We're doing neither. We're just existing in a place that's sustainable for us and thriving in that space. That's how I look at it. So it's not about beating anyone or destroying anyone or taking a market or anything. It's about thriving. And you can thrive as long as your costs are in check and you have a nice customer base, you can thrive. And that's all we're trying to do here. It's very much like nature, going back to the nature thing. You know, in any ecosystem, there are, can be tens of thousands of species coexisting. You know, they're battling for resources, but they're not battling to take all the resources. They're battling to find their share of the resources that support them and their species. And it turns out that a lot can coexist in the same square mile. That to me is a great model for business, actually, and that's what we try to do.
Recently, you have a blog post and also you mentioned about the intuition and gut feeling,
Yes.
the importance of making decisions on the intuition base and gut decision. And you are asking not about what do you know, what do you think in the company, as far as I have listened. And that is an interesting approach. Do you ever feel there are limitations for this approach? Because you are also doing A/B tests. It's not intuition. It is purely maths. Is there limitations about intuition and data-based decision?
Yes, everything's a trade-off. But to your point about A/B tests, we don't do them that much. But when we do them, this is the interesting thing about A/B tests. So you test two things, and you get data, and everyone looks at the data. But I look at the two things. Where'd those come from? Why those two things? So why not test two other things, or two other things, or pick any combination of things? Where'd those ideas come from that you're testing in the first place? Did they come from other tests? Where'd those tests come from? So if you keep going down, at some point, it's like someone made a decision to try something. Someone had a hunch. Someone had an intuition. This design might be better than this design. And maybe you find out that it is, but where'd the designs come from? That, to me, I like to go backwards there and keep going backwards. And you realize at some point, someone just made a call. Where'd that call come from? It came from their gut at some point, some level, somewhere. Some designer decided to put the line here and not there. It wasn't scientific. It was intuition-based. It was based on experience and judgment and years and art and all the things that we don't know and the millions of inputs that we don't understand that are influencing us every single day. I just find that mystery to be very interesting. And I find it to be more honest, frankly, just to say that it is kind of a mystery. And yeah, you can measure some things at the end of the chain or at the end of the line. But what about the rest of the line? That to me is where it's exciting. So we're primarily a gut-driven, intuition-driven company. We make decisions on the fly. We come up with things, we try things, and we don't feel like we need to justify the things that we try or the things that we do. In the end, the market will tell us whether or not this is a viable idea or not. It doesn't mean it's a good or bad idea. Is it a viable idea in the market, in that environment? That's what the market can tell you. It's a good idea if you like the idea. If that satisfies you, it's a good idea. But whether or not it's viable is up to the market. So we leave the market. We leave it up to the market to determine whether or not we can stay in business. And so far, we found that this is a pretty effective way of running a business for us. Other people are going to be different, but I would still challenge people to say who are very data driven to say, well, where'd the things that you're testing come from? It's a great question just to ask, even if you want to argue it. It's still a good question to ask. And I would ask, what are the things that you think of? Where those things come from, where those things come from. If you go back a few layers, you don't really know where things came from. Now, I think that's interesting.
When you become indecision process, I mean, not making a decision, especially intuition, do you sleep on it?
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, oftentimes, actually. I would say if it's a really small decision, you just kind of make it. But if it's sort of like an interesting, bigger decision, perhaps, a couple of us will be debating something, and then we'll say, you know what? Here's the decision we think we're going to make, but let's sleep on it. So we tend to make a decision and then sleep on the decision versus not making one, sleeping on it, and then seeing what comes up the next day. So we do like to tend to get to something by the end of the conversation, and then we'll sleep on it. And the next morning has a way of telling you something different, or reinforcing what you picked. But there's a clarity that comes from tomorrow morning that doesn't come from right now. Right now, you're in the thick of it. You're bubbling with thoughts. You're arguing for something. Your ego's more involved. But you sleep on it and you wake up and all that stuff is not true anymore. Like the ego is not really there. And you're like, well, how do I feel about it today? And I like the clarity that tomorrow brings. But tomorrow is tomorrow. It's not every tomorrow forever. You keep thinking and pondering and thinking, like, you got to make a call. So we tend to give it a day.
So can you give an example of a hard decision, recent decision? So particularly challenging. How do you navigate the complexities and to reach a conclusion?
Well, so a good recent example is as I mentioned, we're starting a new product this week, and we had 3 ideas that we could pursue that we felt pretty good about. So which one are we going to pursue? Now, that sounds like a big challenging question, and it sort of is, but it also isn't that big of a deal because we move quickly. So we're going to take about 3 months, which is about 2 cycles worth of work. 2 cycles are 6 weeks at a time. So we're going to take about 3 months to build this next product. Now, that's not that long. It's pretty short. And the good news is we can do the next one in about 3 months. So decisions become hard and challenging and complicated and complex when you only get to make one of them over a long period of time. So if we're going to spend 3 years on our next product and then 3 years on the next one after that, and through 9 years to make 3 things, then the next decision you make is a huge consequential decision. But if you're going to make something that's only going to take a few months and you get to make the next thing after that, it's not as big of a decision. So on paper, it's a big decision. What's the next product you're going to make? But if you get to make another decision not too long from now, it minimizes the severity of the decision, which makes it more free-flowing and makes it easier to make ultimately versus like really feeling like you got to make the right one. I'm not that interested in making the right one. I'm interested in making one that we are comfortable with and that we know that if it doesn't work, we can make a different one not too far from now. So that's how I tend to think about these things. So to your question, like, it is a big decision. It's an important one, but also from my point of view, there are very few super, super important key decisions like that you have to make that you can't just revisit in a few months. I think Jeff Bezos talks a lot about this one-way, two-way decisions. Have you heard of this?
Yes,
have you heard him talk about this?
Open door,
I really like it.
Closed door.
Closed door, yeah. So there are very few closed door decisions. There are very few one-way decisions where you're pouring concrete and you can't change your mind. Hardly any. But I think people treat so many as if they are. And that's why they get all bound up and they're afraid and they double and triple and quadruple check everything and they have more people involved and they get more opinions and things get drawn out. They're putting too much on something that doesn't deserve it. And so we're very careful about that.
So in these tough decisions, do you have mentors or friends whose opinions you seek out for certain decisions?